Hello and welcome to Red Shirt Cinema Club, a weekly podcast about fandom and watching things with friends. Today we turn our gaze towards An Unexpected Journey, the first film in Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy that graced cinemas in the early 2010s. Widely regarded as nowhere near as good as The Lord of the Rings, what will we make of it when viewed with over a decade of hindsight? Listen on to find out.
Far to the east, over ranges and rivers, lies a single solitary peak. The dwarves are determined to reclaim their homeland.
I like visitors as much as the next Hobbit. But I do like to know them before they come visiting.
Mr. Baggins? At your service.
I'm surrounded by dwarves. What are they doing here?
Oh, they're quite a merry gathering.
So, this is the Hobbit.
You asked me to find the 14th member of this company, and I have chosen Mr. Baggins.
Me? No.
Hobbits can pass unseen by most if they choose, which gives us a distinct advantage.
We will seize this chance to take back Erebor!
Here, Mr. Bilbo! Where are you off to?
I'm going on an adventure!
Mithrandir, why the halfling?
Why Bilbo Baggins? Perhaps it is because I'm afraid. And it gives me courage.
So this is your purpose, to enter the mountain?
What of it?
There are some who would not deem it wise.
A dark power has found a way back into the world.
Why don't we have a game of riddles?
And if it loses, what then? Well, if it loses precious, then we eat it. If Baggins loses, we eat it whole.
Fair enough.
I will take each and every one of these dwarves over the mightiest army. Loyalty, honor, a willing heart. I can ask no more than that.
Home is now behind you. The world is ahead.
Well, that could have been worse.
Hello and welcome to Red Shirt Cinema Club. I am your host, emaciated, cave-dwelling, terrible guesser of riddles, Rob Pearson, joined today by one of the unsettlingly handsome dwarves, who's not Thorin, it's Nathan Dighton, but not Dave either, because Dave is busy looking after his newborn child. So to his company for today's episode as we tackle The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, a film I've just watched for the first time in over 12 years. Nathan, I'm curious to know how many times you've seen this film.
I believe it's 2. I saw it on release and then yesterday.
Well, so I think it's safe to say our relationship with these films is very different to the one we enjoy with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which we have both seen many, many times.
Yeah.
And I found this actually to be a really interesting watch, an unexpected journey and an unexpected reaction, because I did not hate this anywhere near as much as I remembered hating it.
Good. I don't want us to hate it. I hate it.
You hate it?
I don't know. I just don't like it. I'm going to try and be positive.
I think we should go through the film. I've also got some questions and talking points I want to pick out as we go.
Yeah.
Many of which I imagine we'll just touch upon as we go through it. So I guess before we dive in though, like, are there any sort of like overall impressions on why you hate it so much?
Yeah, and I don't hate it so much. I feel like it just doesn't work. I've got like a list. I can go through the list. It's mostly things I didn't enjoy, but the key one is the big one. I think there's like, I was thinking about this as I came in, how I'm going to say this without it being the only thing I have to say about this film.
Right.
It's like one cohesive thought which sums up why I just don't think it works, and it's because it's The Hobbit, as we all know, is a children's story, and it was written before Lord of the Rings. You put yourself in this position as the filmmakers and that creative team of having had this enormous success and then agreeing eventually to follow it up with The Hobbit. And you've had this incredible climax of the Lord of the Rings. Following that, it's a preceding story that becomes a successor to something which is almost impossible to top. And I feel like that is the ultimate kind of reason why I find it unsatisfying. And then there were a bunch of kind of production reasons, but who knows whether that would have made a huge difference. But ultimately, it tries to do too much with a story that isn't up to the task, and then tries to inflate that story to make it up to the task. And a lot of the things that I don't like about the film come from that.
I think so. I think one of the points I'd written down was the rise, I don't know where we are really in the chronology of this, but the rise of franchise filmmaking and the impact of that culture on this as an adaptation of The Hobbit. And it's ironic, isn't it, that they struggled to get more than one Lord of the Rings film made initially.
Right.
They had to fight to make 3.
Yeah.
And now they're almost like being told they have to make 3. You have to make 3. I think it was initially going to be 2.
It was going to be 2.
But yeah, I massively agree with it. I think I'm reading The Hobbit to my daughter at the moment, and we're already past the end of where this film stops. This film stops at the end of the chapter, out of the frying pan into the fire.
It's about page 80, isn't it?
Page 105.
Right.
So there's 105 pages that has been adapted into a 2-hour, 49-minute theatrical cut, which is the version we watched, with so much, in my opinion, unnecessary padding. And like you say, I think you hit the nail on the head when you're like, it's a children's book. It's literally a children's book. And so the bits of the adaptation that are faithful to the book are, by their nature, quite cartoonish and childlike.
That's the thing. I don't necessarily like those bits either.
I know, because it's such a... And I guess because it's so jarring when you compare it to The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
But then, really, I think that's where the film is, as an adaptation, it's at its most successful. Like, I was thinking... maybe my daughter should come down and watch this with me. Maybe I'll tell her I'm watching this. Yeah. And I got like half an hour through. It's like, no, she'd be bored out of her frigging mind watching this.
It is boring.
It's not a kid's film either. It's not a film for people who enjoy The Lord of the Rings. It's like flapping about in the middle, not doing particularly well at either.
Maybe we should talk specifics, because I could talk relatively negatively about the... but I've got more to say about it, for sure. But and there are scenes, like you said, that I really do enjoy. And actually, I kind of thought, like the fan edits are a huge thing with the Hobbit movies, and there's like, I don't know, there's like half a dozen quite well-known fan edits on the internet which condense it in one form or another. So, and they get down from 8 hours of the full running time to about 4 hours. And actually, what I thought was, the book is very much scene by scene. It's got that kind of, it's very much in the mode of an old kind of European poem or story.
Yeah.
And it has just episodes of, we meet this person, then we meet this person. I actually feel like if you just edited those scenes individually, so you had the dwarves coming, and then you had riddles in the dark, and then you had the barrels, and then you had Bjorn or whatever, I feel like that would be quite fun. The movie could be 2 hours long, and it does those scenes. I guess in trying to salvage something I actually really like about these films, the production is still, even though it's not on the level of Lord of the Rings, and I think that's to do with the prep time potentially and more use of CG, it still delivers these brilliant versions.
Mm-hmm.
But they're like, in the same way that I used to watch those animations when I was a kid and go, oh, this is almost good, isn't it? It's like 2/3 of Lord of the Rings, and at the end it's just loads of guys in cloaks running around and rotoscoped, but it's the best I've got. And I kind of feel like that about The Hobbit. Like, the bits that are good are still great.
Yeah. Well, I guess we should just go through it then.
Let's do it.
So, like The Lord of the Rings, we start off with like a big prologue scene. And I think immediately this is where I was noticing like just major differences. And I can't quite put my finger on why it looks worse than The Lord of the Rings. But it just does.
I think that the more people were not in New Zealand, and the more people were shot on green screen and then composited in.
Well, I'd heard how Ian McKellen didn't actually share the set with anyone.
Yeah.
And he was doing most of his scenes.
There's all those TikToks of him being really angry.
Just in a green screen being really sad. And these are stories that are emerging more now as well. And how the cast and crew decorated his trailer to try and cheer him up.
Oh.
But yeah, the whole Erebor bit, I think there's just there's an absurdity to some of it as well that goes beyond fantasy and wonder. Like when you got that shot in the mines and the camera pans down to reveal how deep the mines go.
Yeah.
It's like, come on now. Like this is ridiculous. This is a cartoon. Like it should stop somewhere. I know this is a fantasy movie. It's like those scenes in the Lord of the Rings where it just kept on going up the Tower of Barad-dûr, but in a way that was kind of cool. Like, oh my god, this tower's
Can you
huge.
imagine though telling Peter Jackson, Peter, your minds are too deep, man. What are you doing? Like this is
You've delved too greedily
and too deep. I do feel like one of the problems that I have of The Hobbit is that whether I don't know. Every now and again I do this and then I look it up and I realise that actually it was in the book, but that it seems to be consciously aping successes or stylistic flourishes that had happened in the first trilogy.
Yes.
And they don't. It's a different story. It needs a different treatment.
Yeah. So we've also got the much expanded character Azog, the Defiler.
Yeah.
The big CG orc who we get to see in the prologue as like this figure who Thorin has like a long-standing feud with, murdered Thorin's father. As you say, really just taking narrative strokes from Sauron and Isildur and Isildur's father. None of it's in the book.
No.
None
Well,
of it's in the book at all.
Azog exists, right?
He's very briefly mentioned.
He's dead.
Like he's already dead.
He's dead.
To the point where he even gets his hand cut off. Like Thorin literally cuts his hand off.
That's true, yeah. I hadn't thought about that.
It's so beat for beat what happens with Isildur and Sauron.
I tell you, on a positive note, and lots of people I've often thought, why aren't there more dwarves in Lord of the Rings? I was always a dwarf guy. I had my only Warhammer army book is the dwarf book. My only army of Warhammer that I ever built and painted is dwarves. I was down for this. I was a dwarf in World of Warcraft, and I reached the level cap on my own. And I like that you get to see a kingdom. That's why I didn't really think the mines were too deep. I thought that is the precise depth that I would like to have seen dwarf mines. I was down for it, and there's a bit of sort of specificness and mad pomposity to the kind of the kingdom, but they're taking a shot at like we haven't seen it. We saw Moria, and that huge creative challenge, I guess, of saying now we want to do a dwarf kingdom, but it's not dead. It's like what does it look like when it's thriving and alive? And I think it's actually one of the things that Rings of Power season 1, not seen season 2, but I think it does really, really well.
I agree. I actually enjoyed the Moria stuff in Rings of Power season 1.
It's brilliant. And Durin. And so didn't hate any of that. The only thing I did hate was how consciously it seemed to be repeating the structure, and also that the tone of it. And again, I started not rereading The Hobbit. I read a couple of scenes, but I've been listening to an abridged version of the audiobook read by Martin Shaw, appropriately grisly British character actor. And the tone, it's difficult to explain, isn't it, quickly, but the tone is not of the grand cycle of Lord of the Rings, and the sort of elevated seriousness of watching your dad be killed by Azog, and then that doesn't really fit. Like Thorin's just sort of a grumpy old dwarf trying to find some gold, and that's the thing. They're all dwarves wearing hoods, trying to steal gold. They're not on the surface of it. I think you can bring those themes in of trying to reclaim a lost kingdom, but I also feel like in this, I go back to my Doctor Who problem and my Star Trek problem of turning up on a planet and just wanting to speak to the boss of the planet, and I kind of feel like you're almost dealing with something which is, it's like a whole kingdom, and it's represented by these like totemic figures.
Yeah, they're the only ones who answer Thorin's call, though. He says,
"Yeah,
I asked everyone to come and help me take back Erebor, and only you lot."
You just give it up, wouldn't you? Why don't we go and take over like a small hill, and then maybe we can work
we
up.
just had a wizard and a little hobbit. Maybe we might stand a chance, though. Yeah, and that's the quest, isn't it? I guess, and then we get to after the prologue, which again, it introduces Smaug. We see him a little bit in the prologue.
You see his ass,
and we see his nose and eye right at the end.
Yeah,
that's all we see of
building
Smaug
up a picture of Smaug.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a cool villain. He's a great villain, Smaug.
It's like pictures you'd get on a dragon dating profile. You know, like people are very cagey about showing like just a full length shot of themselves. You just get like a bit of their face, some stylistic ones. Yeah, Smaug is great, and we can talk about him next week, I'm sure. But the big question, Rob, is what do you think of Martin Freeman as the Hobbit?
I don't like Martin Freeman in general.
I struggle. At this time, I was a big enjoyer of Martin Freeman when the film came out. And before the film came out, in that tortured production kind of history of, well, are they going to make it, are they not? We didn't do a production history this time. And
no.
Maybe it's fair. But, I mean, there were loads of... I guess what happens after a huge success like Lord of the Rings is everyone kind of looks at how much money they've made and goes, I should have been making more money. So Peter Jackson and Weta sued New Line. And then the Tolkien estate sued New Line. Meanwhile, the rights specifically for The Hobbit were split between United Artists, who had made the original Lord of the Rings animation, and Warner Brothers in a way which I still don't really understand. And they were trying to do a deal together. They eventually sorted out a co-production, but it was right around the time that MGM, which had bought United Artists at some point in the 80s, I think, was also in the process of being sold eventually to Amazon Studios, which is why we got Rings of Power. And it took ages for them to come to a deal. And after Peter Jackson sued New Line, the boss of New Line said, well, he's never directing another movie for us. A couple of years later, as you say, franchise filmmaking, they were like, actually, we'd love to work with Peter Jackson again. That would be fantastic.
What did he sue New Line for?
The, participation in franchise profits, so like merchandising video games. That I think he actually just said, all we want you to do is audit what you've done. We're not saying you owe us this or that. Can you just show us the books? And they said, this is awful. He can never work with us again.
Wow.
We're not hiding anything, but we're never working with you again. They eventually settled, so they did owe him something, obviously. Or they just wanted to be in the Peter Jackson business. And then they were going to set it up with your man, Guillermo del Toro. And the whole time, Peter Jackson was saying, Martin Freeman is our Bilbo. He's the only person we want. And at that time, he hadn't done all the things that he's done now. He hadn't done, I think, I guess the big thing was Sherlock. And I was like, this is fucking brilliant. Yeah, of course he should be Bilbo Baggins. And I remember at the time, I wrote a piece back then, I can't remember who for, but he'd been in Hitchhikers, and I knew that he was going to be John Watson, and then he was going to be Bilbo Baggins. And this like collection of sort of set upon Middle England characters.
Yeah.
Which I just thought were brilliant. But the problem is that I've seen him do that fucking character so many times that when I look back now, all I see is Martin Freeman. I don't really see a performance.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's just, we criticise Ricky Gervais in The Office for it's just Ricky Gervais and everything.
Yeah.
And it turns out Martin Freeman's just Martin Freeman in everything.
Apart
from in Fargo.
Days. I was going to say.
Fargo is the only time I think I've watched Martin Freeman where I've thought to myself, I've just forgotten that I'm watching Martin Freeman and I'm just been watching his character. But he is just Martin Freeman in this, unfortunately.
There's loads of just like... straight arms.
Little looks.
And then, I'm serious now, actually. Like, I've had enough. I mean, he's better at doing Martin Freeman than we are, but it doesn't mean that I want to see him for 8 hours.
No. And I just, everything about it makes me sad. Right at the beginning when we get to see, unnecessarily in my opinion, Ian Holm and Elijah Wood, I just don't want to see them.
Ian Holm looks like he's incredibly old.
Has something, something bad's happened to Ian Holm. Obviously, age has happened to Ian Holm.
He's in his 80s, I think. And Elijah Wood just looks thinner, and his hair looks weird.
Yeah, they've not just wear the same wig, man.
Maybe that's the problem. Maybe it's the same wig. 10 years old.
But yeah, he just doesn't look right. And obviously, we're supposed to be looking at a younger version of Frodo, of a version of Frodo.
He's on the party day.
The events of Lord of the Rings haven't happened to yet.
Yeah. He looks strung
out.
Mean,
obviously, it's all the actors are 10 years older than they were in the original film.
So don't put them in the fucking film.
So don't put them in the film, exactly. Like, obviously, Ian McKellen needs to be in there.
He looks great.
And Ian McKellen he does look good. And I think, well,
who else looks good? Brett McKenzie. He looks amazing in this film.
Who's Brett McKenzie?
I think it's almost like an in-joke. Brett McKenzie's from Flight of the Conchords, which I'm sure you haven't seen, judging by
I've
your
not.
face.
And he's the elf. He's that elf. Yeah.
He's back. It's like they gave him...
Lady Arwen.
They gave him a bigger role in this
Also, Hugo Weaving looks pretty good, I thought.
He does. He looks...
And also, he should be in it because he is in The Hobbit.
Rivendell is there.
Yeah.
He is permissible.
Yes. But yeah, we get the whole dwarves coming to the dinner party scene, which was the first instance of cartoonishness that I remember watching when I first saw this that very slightly offended me.
Did we watch this together in Cardiff?
No.
Because a group of us went to
so.
I can imagine it's exactly the kind of invitation you would decline.
Why would you go to Cardiff to watch a film?
Because it was on IMAX. It's not very good.
I was in Bristol to see the second one. That was when I left the movie halfway through.
Yeah, the Cinema Deluxe.
Yeah. But I remember I wanted so much to enjoy. I was like, yeah, more Middle Earth. And just really trying so hard to not be completely out of it as soon as they started throwing the crockery around.
Yeah.
Like they sing the song in the book. They sing the song in the film that they sing in the book. Cool.
I would say more than that. The scenes in Bag End are like this yin and yang of why I am sad that this film isn't better and also cannot really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because, and listeners, you maybe know me a little by now. Holy shit, the scene with the plates. I hate it so much.
Yeah.
It's like, do you remember when we watched Insurrection, Star Trek Insurrection, and there's a shot of like 5 children playing fucking hacky sack, and they're obviously not really, they're just going around in a circle, just doing this with their shoulders, and then someone CG'd in a bunch of fucking hacky sacks. This is that scene, but with dwarves and plates. They're not, there's no way that they could do that with the plates. And I know that there's a cleaning up with plates scene in the book, but this is exactly the problem of trying to straddle the tone of, and we're trying to reclaim our lost fucking kingdom or whatever. The adaptation basically is not up to straddling that tone and giving us both.
No.
And this isn't very good. Like, the plate scene is just unforgivably clownish. And then right after that, maybe one of my favourite scenes in the whole film, where they're all just having a nice smoke around the fire and they sing a really sad song.
Oh my God, the song is so good.
So brilliant.
The song is the one thing, the song, everyone knows what song it is, that belongs in the Middle-earth verse as created by Peter Jackson, in my opinion.
Yes.
I will listen to this song. I've got it in a playlist along with a bunch of Lord of the Rings music because it just fits in there so brilliantly. When they're tramping over the mountains, the few actual landscape shots we get of the dwarves and Gandalf and Bilbo journeying through the New Zealand landscape with this song playing over the top, that's probably like the 5 minutes of this film where I'm like, yeah, I can see this. This is correct.
Yeah, right.
For this bit,
and I don't think that they are, obviously the what we're talking about is that they can't sustain that. For and I don't know if it's possible or whether it's like they've misstepped. You know, is it possible to raise up and adapt and change and tweak what is in the book to make it of that level all the way through? I don't know. When we went to Cardiff to watch this, and then we went to everyone obviously. No one has a piss for fucking 3 hours, and then everyone goes to the bathroom at the same time. And in the urinal, spontaneously, like the men in the toilets were like all humming that song, and they were doing it together. It was weird. I was kind of like, do I want to join in with the weird humming while I'm taking a piss with all these strangers?
I like post-film pisses. There's been sorry, I'm going off topic now.
No, don't go.
But I remember watching Mad Max, the first one, with Tom Hardy and
the fourth one,
Charlize Theron in it. Sorry, the fourth one. Yeah, the first new one in LA, and all the Americans were cheering and whooping and standing up during all the action scenes. And as a British person, I was like, "Oh, what's going on here?" But you sort of get into it, and for a film like that, you're like, "Yeah, okay, it's perfect." And obviously, no one went for a piss during that either. It's like 2.5 hours of ridiculous action, and then the urinals after that. It was the most violent drumming pissing. It was like a war chant almost. The urinal was just a wall of just incredibly violent piss hitting the urinals. Just men who'd just been in this amazing breathless action movie, just releasing all of that. It was so apt for the film we'd just seen.
That sounds awful.
Yeah, it was, but also great. Anyway,
I took this is, we talked a little bit about families. This is why Jay doesn't like Lord of the Rings. I'm sure now I think about it, because I took him to see The Hobbit on opening night, and we all went, and he knew I loved Lord of the Rings. He was still an impressionable young man then. I guess he was 11 years old, 10 years old.
Oh man, this is like when my dad took me to see Star Wars when they re-released them all, the original trilogy, just before they brought out the prequels. And my dad was like, "Oh, I love Star Wars. Take you to see Star Wars."
This should have been 12.
Around about 11 or 12. And my dad was notoriously bad at timekeeping, was late to all of the films.
Oh.
I remember just sort of like having to do the awkward shuffle down the cinema row in Return of the Jedi. And we arrived during the scene where Princess Leia was throttling Jabba the Hutt. So like half an hour into the movie.
Oh my God. That is sacrilege. So, yeah. And with ads, you must have been almost a full hour late. That is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow.
Where were we anyway? Plates.
We're at plates.
The plate bit.
Plates bad. Song very good.
And then it'd be very easy. I've not written down everything that happened to go through this chronologically, but we're off on the adventure then, and then we get various bits of stuff that isn't in the book starting to creep in at this point. So the Radagast bit, which again, it's just a bit weird, isn't it?
I don't even like. I wanted to see Radagast. I was so excited when they said that he was going to be in the film.
Yeah.
Why is he covered in shit, man? Why is he covered in shit?
It's like Peter Jackson has just turned up all his little artistic wants and quirks.
I agree.
He's dialed them all just too far. You know when you turn up the volume on something, it just all the audio distorts.
Yeah.
That's what's happened to Peter Jackson in this film. Oh yeah, just have him covered in bark, like he's got a face that's like it's made of wood. He's got poo and mud all over him, and he's Radagast the Brown. He lives in a little hut that's falling to bits, made of moss.
The rabbit.
The poor
chariot.
hedgehog. He's got a rabbit chariot and a hedgehog that's called Sebastian that he's sad that's died.
I like Sebastian, but the rest of it, I just don't know what tone we're going for, and maybe it survives from a version of the film or the script that which was more children focused. I don't know. I don't even like, and I wouldn't. Again, I wouldn't have invited a film which was all the way through of a different register to Lord of the Rings. It's the hopping about that bothers me, I think. And I guess things like Radagast really make me wonder, with the spiders climbing over his house, if Guillermo del Toro had ended up directing the films as was the original plan, I think they would have given you the kind of the shift and the sideways step creatively that would have separated it from Lord of the Rings and would have it just opened the door, or at least given it a better chance of success, not needing to stand alongside the Lord of the Rings films. I can't enjoy Radagast.
No,
it's just not. He's supposed to be a wizard. He's supposed to be incredibly wise, and he's this mad racing around cartoon figure. He's on a fucking sled.
There's a little bit about it that I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like as a Tolkien nerd, there was stuff in this that isn't in the book, that shouldn't have been in the film. It doesn't make the film any better. But despite it all, I was like, oh, interesting. Like when he goes to the fortress, the abandoned fortress in Mirkwood.
Yeah.
And the Witch King of Angmar is there. And Radagast has a little fight with the Witch King of Angmar. It's a bit shit, but I'm like, oh, it's Radagast fighting the Witch King.
I know.
Before the Witch King has actually fully come into his power. And then the Necromancer is there. He discovers the Necromancer.
I love the Necromancer.
Which is cool because we get to see a little bit of Sauron as he is gathering his strength. He initially bases himself in Mirkwood.
Yeah.
And this all comes to light later in the story of the Lord of the Rings, that all along it was Sauron sort of like biding his time. And
well, in the book, Thorin's father or his grandfather is taken prisoner by the Necromancer, and Gandalf finds him in the dungeons of Dol Guldur, and that's where he gets the map and the key. I think maybe that's later on in The Hobbit, and you've not got there yet.
Maybe I've not got to that bit
yet.
But
that is what happens, and he's lost his mind, and he can't remember. He can't remember his son's name, so that's why Gandalf doesn't give him the map immediately, according to J.R.R. Tolkien anyway. I liked, we were talking about uncanny representations of things. What did we want? The Army of the Dead. And I thought that the idea of the Necromancer as just this silhouette, this darkness, I was on board with that. That was great. That was cool. I feel like the Necromancer, I know that he's mentioned in various places, and not only off hand references in the main stories, in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and then more in the appendices and I think the Unfinished Tales. And so I don't know if the chronology of it is particularly... It's not made to be dramatic. It's made to be a history. So there's these references, but then if you actually line them all up and plot them narratively, they're not necessarily the most satisfying. And I'm not sure that the film really does a great job of making whatever's happening in Mirkwood seem anything other than a curiosity.
Yeah.
But I didn't hate those scenes. I wasn't against those scenes at all. And similar with the White Council. And I like that, the idea that those things are going on. They're not mentioned in the book, but they could be going on.
The White Council is the other thing I enjoyed. Just because it's like, it's cool to see Saruman on the screen before he went completely bad.
Yes.
Galadriel, just having those four characters, Galadriel, Saruman, Gandalf and Elrond, all in a place together just talking about stuff.
It's
quite cool, isn't it?
I'm not sure what I thought about, simping Gandalf. Do you know what I mean? Like he's trying to flirt desperately with yes, I did know already. I'm not sure that I like those moments. In general, it also made me think about, I guess I thought the elves are still brilliant. They're still amazing.
Yeah, I don't like Thranduil though.
No, I don't like Thranduil. But then all that they give him to do in this is to look down at the dwarves of Erebor and not help them.
Yes.
Which again, it's not in the book, ladies and gentlemen. They make him seem really mean and removed. Maybe that's fair. Maybe that's taken from somewhere else. I don't know. But Galadriel and Elrond, I think, are spot on. And Galadriel has got this, and I assume it's because she has lived in the West and she has Elrond has more of an earthliness to him, and he's got some human heritage as well. But Galadriel is just completely ethereal, and she still has that kind of frame rate thing going on, where she's moving half the frame rate speed of everybody else. She's sort of just fluttering.
Yeah,
it's great.
It's great. I don't know if I enjoyed it, but sort of maybe laugh the way Saruman is treated like the idiot uncle at Christmas. It's just like, just let him talk his shit.
I did think that they had to be more in line. There is a version of this where they have a really kind of Game of Thronesy, we know what's going on if we really read into it version, where Saruman's ulterior motives, and his ulterior motives at this point aren't, I'm going to go and work with Sauron. They're just, he would like the ring to come to prominence so that he can find the ring and use it for himself. So he's still very much in that he's on the wrong path, but he's not aligned with Mordor. And what I got instead was, you remember him? He was bad in the last movies, and look at him, he's being a dick now. Isn't he being mean to Gandalf? Wouldn't it be better if he wasn't being mean to Gandalf, but you still suspected his motives? I guess what I'm saying is, with a nuance, wouldn't it be good if there was some nuance? Yeah,
it would be good, but I guess he's got 2 or 3 minutes of screen time.
That's true.
To give him some nuance. Although I guess with all the other stuff they unnecessarily packed into this film, maybe it would have been better to give this scene 10 minutes and a little bit of nuance. Yeah. Really, it's just there so that Gandalf can have a little one-up on Saruman. Saruman's like, I don't approve of this quest. And they're only there in the meeting so that Gandalf can distract Saruman so the dwarves can leave Rivendell early.
And I guess it's a great example of trying to move the simpler motivations of the Hobbit book into this wider world, where the quest, when you're telling a story to kids, the motivation is there's a dragon and it's got loads of gold and we're going to go and steal it, so we need a burglar. I mean, it's inherently ridiculous. And then when you get here, it's kind of like, Gandalf has made this plan because he suspects. It's like, wow, what is going on there? And it's part of his grander vision of, I'm actually an Istari. I'm a sort of angel, and we're doing this thing together with the Wise Elves. It's a very different, like I said, register that it's working on.
Yeah.
Is it good? Who can say?
Who can say? But I like, just as a Tolkien nerd, just having those four characters. It's like I felt during that scene how I felt during most of the Rings of Power season 1, which was, I know this isn't amazing,
right?
But I'm just liking it.
That's
I just
fair.
like it.
I'm set. Going to Gold, I find it very difficult to say. Dol Guldur. I really enjoyed. Just enjoyed all of that. I enjoyed the weirdness of it. I'd heard loads about it. I thought the design of these things is still spectacular in these films.
Yes.
Fun. I didn't enjoy didn't really enjoy Radagast. Finally going to show us a wizard, one of the 5. I like the little joke about the blue wizards. I can't remember their names.
Yes.
And I was actually thinking this morning, though, on a side note, how riven our everyday conversation is with Lord of the Rings quotes. And I can't remember. I don't say anything from the Hobbit movies.
No. Well, like you said, we've only seen them twice. What is there to quote?
Yeah, I guess
there's
that's
the
true.
quote that comes up on TikTok all the time, which is, "The world is not in your books and maps. It's out there." Which is probably the most Gandalf thing Gandalf says in this film.
I feel like that's a really good insight into your algorithm as well. Go outside and walk, Rob.
Yes,
You're on
5
walk top.
best mountains to climb in Scotland, and it's got Ian McKellen's voice. Yes. So there's a bunch of stuff happens all around this. Like they're running from some orcs that Azog has sent after them.
Yeah.
They're having a little meeting at Weathertop. Apparently, I was reading.
Was it Weathertop?
They were at Weathertop, yeah. Azog was standing at Weathertop just looking out. And that's when the
watchtower.
The lieutenant orc comes up. He's like, "Oh, we couldn't, we were out now. Oh, no." And he's just like, "Shut up, man. He's going to kill you." 'Cause he's going to show everyone how bad he is by killing his lieutenant for failing him. And indeed, that is what he does. Throws him to the wargs. And then there's the bit as well where they're just before they get to Rivendell, actually, that I've forgotten, with the giants, the storm giants, which is in the book.
Yeah.
But they're far off.
Yeah.
They're in the storm and they can hear, and I think occasionally see silhouetted on the skyline as the lightning flashes.
They weren't on the knees of the storm giants.
And so Peter Jackson said, "Wouldn't it be cool if we had them on the stone giants?" It turns out the mountain they're on was actually a stone giant, and we get, I think, the first instance of an action set piece where the survival of our main characters is so ludicrously cartoonish that it completely takes me out of any kind of peril. Like, even in the first Lord of the Rings trilogy, in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, when characters are in danger, you know they're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. They're the main characters, right? But there's still like a really exciting sense of realistic peril to all of the dangerous situations they're in.
Yeah.
Like when you've got a whole group of dwarves just magically sticking and defying gravity and sticking to the knee of this rock giant as it flails about and falls down, and they're just passed from one bit of rock to another bit of rock, and the mountains are clashing and falling into each other, and they're just like hopping between them. It's like it's ludicrous, and I can't enjoy it because
You become untethered from the situation.
yeah,
don't you?
it's just. I mean, I'm watching a live action movie and all of a sudden it feels like a cartoon. And it does this a bunch of times. The plates was another one. It's the one shot in the plate sequence that really does it for me is when Bomber is facing the sink and he like just puts 2 hands up and someone else throws the plates from behind and he catches them without looking and just it's just not real, is it?
Do you know what? I resent not only that scene exists, but that we're put in the position where we have to say we don't like it. That's what I really dislike. What kind of a person have you made me, The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, where we're talking about a fat dwarf and plates? Yeah, I agree. Have we skipped over the troll scene?
Possibly.
The troll scene is like, because basically my understanding of The Hobbit, the earliest forms comes from school plays that we used to do. I remember one particular performance. And so they would all be based on the episodic nature of the book made it perfect for an adaptation into school plays. And it would be, like the dwarves come, trolls, riddles in the dark, goblins, spiders.
Yeah.
And then the end of the book. And this is an interesting one because I did read this scene, and this scene is very close. That they don't have the ponies, but the scene is very close to the book. And I still didn't really enjoy it. So I don't know what the film's going to do.
Yeah. I think it was close to the tone of the book, this scene. Like, this was a scene I quite enjoyed reading to my daughter because I got to do all the trolls' voices.
I love their names in the book. I'm not sure they say the names.
I can't remember what their names are.
William, Bert, and something else.
Yes. They're so different to the cave troll in the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Obviously. They
chat.
They've got a wit about them and a sense of humour about them.
Mutton today.
And there's the cartoonishness of having dwarves literally on a spit turning above a fire.
Yeah,
like their faces would be melting. They'd be dripping off. They would be literally being cooked.
I think they're just in sacks in the book, but
Yeah, they put them in the sacks in the book. And the thing in the book, Bilbo doesn't have any clever ideas about stalling for time or keeping the argument going. It's all Gandalf. Like Gandalf turns up and he magically throws his voice and makes it seem like he's one of the trolls, and he just keeps them arguing until the dawn happens.
I bang on about that sort of the tone. If you read, there's a lot less sort of sophistication and sort of modern sensibility about like old Northern European stories, but you can just picture this, the trick being enough that he made the trolls argue amongst themselves, and then the dawn came.
Yeah.
Like that's clever. That's enough. And I think that in the children's story, it's enough. And then here again, you just need something else. You get Gandalf on top of a fucking great big rock, cracking it to pieces.
I can tolerate that. And I think it was, as an adaptation, it was, giving Bilbo something to do, or giving him some kind of ability or agency or just brains. Like and here's an opportunity for the film to ingratiate Bilbo to the dwarves, because at this point he's been completely useless, let's be honest. And there's I almost made me laugh when they're all saying they didn't have parasites, and then Thorin gives them a little nudge with his foot. I've got parasites. No, yeah, I do have parasites. That was, almost made me laugh.
That was very Merry and Pippin.
Yes.
Behavior. I think one of the challenges of the film, which I have no idea how it was supposed to do any better with, is having 13 dwarves and trying to give them all. That's why you end up with fuckable dwarves, isn't it? Because they all have to have something about them.
That's why you get the scene where they all come in, where the first 3 come in, and then just all of the rest of them fall into Bag End.
That is one of Alan Lee's illustrations as well.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh.
And again, it's because it's slapstick and it's funny.
I mean, even the look of them is quite ridiculous, isn't it? Like Gimli, again, in The Lord of the Rings, Gimli looks like
he's the dwarf. Something
that could exist.
Yeah,
it looks like a real person.
Yeah.
Again, in this, they all just... Like, Graham McTavish, his bald cap looks dreadful. Graham McTavish is bald anyway.
He needs to have a bigger
And he's just got a massive bald cap to make this big sort of bulbous head, which clearly dwarves don't need to have, because Richard Armitage just looks like a handsome man.
He's like the Aragorn dwarf.
He is the Aragorn dwarf. That's exactly what he is.
I don't like it, Rob.
And
there's one dwarf I would like to eject from the film.
I think I know which one it is.
Nori? No, it's I can't remember. But it's the one who goes on about fucking chips. It's the worst.
Yes.
Very few.
Yes.
Things performances could completely wreck.
Bifer or Bofer? Philly and Keely are. It's not Philly and Keely. They're handsome.
Yeah,
Are you looking it up?
Yeah, I am. The one who likes chips.
Yeah, and then you've got the kind-hearted. You've got Balin, obviously.
Yeah, I love Balin.
Balin's quite nice.
He's really great,
and it's sad to think that he will then die in Moria between the events of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Glowin is there, Gimli's dad.
Yeah, doesn't really do a huge amount, but he does have some Gimli-ish moments.
I couldn't pick him out of the lineup if you asked me to. I don't think. I just know that he's there.
But that's kind of what I want. Is I want there to be more generic. There should be like Thorin, Balin, everybody else. You know what I mean? They're just in the background. It's like the Dirty Dozen. How much do you really get to know the Dirty Dozen? Quite well, actually.
Maybe we're discovering that one of the big problems of the film is that it's an adaptation of a book that just isn't as good as The Lord of the Rings, or maybe isn't that good at all, really.
So you said, is it Dory or Nori?
Yeah.
It was Ori.
Ori!
Yeah. Really, really terrible. One fact about Ori is he wrote the book that they find next to Balin's tomb. They are coming.
He wrote that?
He's the one who wrote
The Chips Dwarf?
Yeah. It's poor, isn't it? He's got a lot of growing to do. I'll stick him up to Jaxie. No, it turns out you won't. Turns out you'll die in Moria.
We cannot get out. We cannot get out.
But you must
they
know
are coming.
When you're making that film, you must know, this performance is clanging awfully. Do you know what I mean? The performer's just doing his best. He's been made up like that. He's been given this to do. Everyone on set must just be going, that was shit, lads. That was fucking shit. People are going to watch this and they're going to
I don't think they were.
They're going to really hate it.
Maybe they all thought it was funny. And maybe lots of people who watched it thought it was funny as well.
Yeah, I'm letting out my frustration in a childish way. I didn't like it though.
No.
I didn't like it. Let's talk about things I did like. Where are we? Some of Rivendell.
We've got
the action. The Gollum, Riddles in the Dark.
Riddles in the Dark was good.
The Goblin, and do you know what? They massively jazzed up the Goblin under the mountain actions. I didn't mind. I thought that was all good. I enjoyed.
Again, there was that big cartoony bit where they just were stuck on that one bit of wood that wouldn't splinter.
I didn't like that.
And it just went all the way down the mountain.
I didn't like that, but everything up until that point, I really did enjoy. I enjoyed all of the. I enjoyed having a big stick and swiping goblins from one side to the other and knocking them off the walkway. It
was choreographed quite well, I thought, and it was fun. It was just a fun scene, and this is the bit where I did get my daughter to come down and watch. So you got to watch this bit. It's the Gollum bit and the bit with the goblins in the mountain, and she enjoyed it.
That scene with Gollum feels like it suddenly retreats to a pace and a level of what kind of, there's like it's too early in the morning. There's the level of craftsmanship and considered confidence that I don't think exists in much more of the movie, and I wouldn't be surprised if they had planned that one more or given it special attention, or it was more like it was going to be in an original version, so they changed it less. It stands out, and it is the saving grace of all of this for me. Like I said, individual scenes which really work, and this one, I'm not sure that I find any fault in it really. This is a really good version of a scene which is at the heart of this story.
I mean, it's one of the best, most memorable scenes in the book, and it's The Lord of the Rings is so good because a lot of it is so faithful, one-to-one adaptation of what happens in the book, down to the lines and the dialogue that is said, and it's just captured beautifully. And this scene is the one example, I think, where it feels like it could be a scene from The Lord of the Rings almost. And Gollum looks slightly different in a way that I think is a little bit worse than Lord of the Rings.
Do you think?
He looks a bit more CG than he did.
Do you think? Because I was thinking, obviously,
he's got that. There's a creep of Marvel smoothness about him here. He's a bit too clean. His eyes are a bit too gleaming and glossy and glowing.
It's because he's been eating loads of fish. I was wondering, because I was like, obviously, CG's moved on.
Yeah.
For the better, you'd have thought.
Yes.
They can do more, but then there is that thing of overreach, which we talk about a lot with special effects. And I was wondering, it would be interesting we should watch some of the Hobbit appendices. They'd maybe tell us. One thing I was going to say, just while I remember it, is I've never seen the Hobbit extended version.
No,
how on earth do you add 20 minutes to this film?
I don't know.
What is in there?
I've no interest in seeing it either.
No,
I never will watch that. It's absurd.
Absurd. But this is a good scene.
This is a good scene.
How are we going to do this for 3 weeks?
Well, this is the one I have seen before. The next two, I've only seen half of the next one, and I haven't seen the third one at all. So there's going to be lots of fun stuff to discuss, I think.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Riddles in the Dark. They do. I thought one thing. Have you read this bit recently?
Yeah.
Okay, good, because I haven't. I didn't think that. So they've extrapolated the sort of the divided self of Gollum, and they've put it back into the Hobbit, right? He doesn't really talk to himself like that in this book, does he?
Not in the book, no. No.
I didn't hate it, but
he says us and precious and all that kind of stuff.
And I do think just let it be. Just let it be. I feel like it's making a film for the people who enjoyed, and maybe that's fair enough, for the people who enjoyed the previous film.
Yeah.
But also with that knowledge, which I think can be dangerous, of what audiences really responded to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I mean about, like the prologue about a huge old battle and a big, like you said, about a hero who's questing to recover something and his father was killed by this guy, blah, blah, blah. And I feel like, again, people really loved Gollum. And that's why we're getting a Gollum movie, which I do not want to see.
No.
And that's why Gollum talks to himself in a very manifest way in this scene, which I didn't completely throw me out, but I was just like narrowing my eyes a bit, just thinking this scene would have been really perfectly fine without that.
The way he finds the ring is a lot more dramatic in the film as well. We see the ring falling out of Gollum's. Where he's put it, I don't know. He's not got a pocket. It's just a little rag around around his private
There's a
parts.
terrible truth to where Gollum's.
So yeah, we see it falling out, and that's obviously a very dramatic moment. Again, because there are lots of things you just said then that are a result of the fact that these movies are being made after the Lord of the Rings, and you've got to take audience reaction and the things audiences loved from those films and embellish certain parts of this. I guess that's just a natural part of making an adaptation. You're not just adapting The Hobbit. You are making, despite the fact it's a prequel, you're essentially making a sequel trilogy to the Lord of the Rings. You've got to have those moments.
You've got to be careful.
In the book, it's over in like a sentence. Like Bilbo, right at the start of the chapter, just puts his hand out. He's groping around in the dark, puts his hand on a ring, puts it in his pocket, and it's over. It's done. You can't make it like that. The one thing that did annoy me was that they did not, because we saw this scene in The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
With Ian Holm, and his hands are just like, what's this? A ring? Extraordinary. And it annoys me that it is slightly different here. They should have made the scene exactly the same as it was, just with Martin Freeman instead of Ian Holm.
Do you know, I've thought about that before as well, and I think that there's probably some space for these films are stories. They're about stories. People talk about the songs that are going to be written all the time, and Bilbo's writing it in his book. Frodo writes his adventures in his book.
I guess so.
And so there's, at what point are we watching a memory? At what point are we watching? I think it's okay for it to diverge a little bit. I quite enjoyed that at the end, though, the audio of Gollum sort of railing against nothing. I think that audio is really similar to the audio that you get in the first Lord of the Rings. Baggins' "We hates them forever," it forever. We hates it forever.
It's good. We get to see the pity shot.
Yeah.
It's really rammed home.
Yeah, it is. It's just staring
Martin
sadly
Freeman.
into space.
It's literally right in front of his face.
A little tear, a little Gollum tear.
You can see the pity happening in Bilbo.
Yeah, I do think that it's very dangerous as an adaptation to know that there is something which audiences have responded to and then go back to it. And I think that, I always say, what do I know, right? But you, having read interviews and seen bits of Peter Jackson talking about this, so they had a pre-production period on Lord of the Rings, the original one. We spoke about it in our podcast of whatever it was, 2 years. Mm-hmm. They said that Miramax spent $20 million on that pre-production. They were making stuff the whole time they were trying to get the films made. So they had this unusually extended pre-production, and I think they're probably leaning more on practical effects because digital just wasn't really there yet. And then for this one, they had, I think, a 2-year period where Guillermo del Toro was prepping the movies. Del Toro talks about working with the creative team of Fran Walsh, Philippa Bowens, Peter Jackson, that he wasn't really a Lord of the Rings fan. He really enjoyed those films, came on to do the Hobbit, had read the books, was like absorbing stuff about the fantasy genre and about Tolkien's life. He said that they were discovering things every week, that they were changing their emphases and how they might write scenes. Guillermo del Toro is still credited as one of the writers on this film. And then eventually, with no end in sight on the MGM situation being resolved, he decided to go and pursue other projects because, he's like, I've got a limited amount of time to make movies and I want to actually make movies. And at that point, when we talked last set of podcasts about Peter Jackson becoming the focal point for this sort of resurgent film industry in New Zealand, I think maybe something I didn't understand at the time. You always think about individuals and what they're doing, and people simplify it to this filmmaker and and the studio or the execs or whatever, and that isn't really how the world works. And Peter Jackson at this point is either involved in or the head of several companies which in New Zealand, special effects companies, and employing hundreds of people who I remember there's a very similar story if you watch George Lucas's the story about holy shit, what's it called? ILM, International Industrial Light and Magic. where at some point you just need throughput. So it might not be that everything you're working on is top tier or whatever, but you just need the meat to be going into the grinder so that people can stay alive. And I think that there was an element of that once Guillermo del Toro had left, Peter Jackson had the choice for these movies not to be made or to make them himself. And he said, I couldn't just make Guillermo's movies. So there's this one interview where he says that he went onto set day to day, not knowing what he was going to shoot, making stuff up, blocking stuff on the fly, that he had no preparation time. And they said that they'd never got the scripts into the position that they really wanted them to be in, and they knew that there was problems with them. And then I just think you just see it all over. And I can imagine once you're in that position of, I think some stuff more planned out than others, but of there being areas you don't know how you're going to do it, you probably do go, do you remember that? We really liked the stuff about pity, didn't we? Should we just make him cry? Should we make Gollum cry, and then he can be pity towards him? I just see that every time I see these films. That's all I see.
Man, it stresses me out thinking about that. Having been on one-day shoots.
What are we doing?
Oh God! Just to think, oh God, you got the crew there, you got the actors there, you've got them for a limited amount of time. You've got to get something done, and you're like, oh God, what do we do?
And then stitching together this enormously complex whole as well. And I think that they had like periods of reshoots and stuff which would have helped. But when they started filming this film, they thought they were making 2 movies. And I think that there's a really revealing bit in one of the behind the scenes documentaries where it's the day where they have word, like an agreement, or it was floated. I'm not sure. People say that studio insisted he makes 3 movies. I don't think that's quite true. And I think that he said yes to 3 movies to solve the problem of, I'm not sure that we're going to get everything that we need to finish this story in 2 movies. But then when you take on a 3rd movie, you introduce a whole other round of problems which are all inherent in the 3rd movie that you haven't seen. So it'll be interesting to get there.
I can't wait to see what the 3rd movie's about. Because don't they get to Smaug at the end of the 2nd movie? Yeah. That's the end of the book, right?
Yeah.
They get the gold. Smaug gets an arrow in his belly.
So they shoot Smaug, and then
they go home.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to get there, won't it? We'll see in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Just a couple of weeks' time. So we enjoy riddles in the dark.
Yeah, we do. And then we're out of the frying pan into the fire.
Yes.
Yes. Maybe I want to touch on the CG orcs again, because we banged on for a long time in our Lord of the Rings episodes about how good the orcs and the Uruk-hai were. And the CG orcs are just rubbish, aren't they? Just not very good.
There was that scene, I think, the one that you specifically called out with his lieutenant. And it was the first time that in this rewatch, I was watching it thinking, it's like, it's not, I know it's not a person, but there's a person in there somewhere. But it was that scene where I just thought, this is like nothing reacting with nothing, and I feel absolutely nothing.
The Goblin King as well. I just don't like him. He's got just a beard of fat.
I think that's a really great design. I really like the
Really?
beard of fat. Yeah, because he's disgusting. I wish it was physical.
And he's got this little tiny scuttling one. He's like, go and tell the pale orc. And he's like, and he's got like little contraption on a zip line across the entire mine.
I love basically everything that happened under the mountain. I think it's really good. I really like, which is also happens in the books, is that they know the swords.
Yes.
Fohammer.
I love that.
Orcrist.
In the book, it's kind of brutal because it's a kid's book, but Gandalf just turns up and annihilates them.
Yeah.
He just cuts loads of heads off.
Yeah.
He's just killing them.
The first thing they see is the sword going through the Goblin King's body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, there's a little comical line, is it? Where they have a little face-off, and the Goblin King's like, "What are you going to do, Gandalf?" And he just slices through his fat beard.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, that'll do it." And then he just falls down dead.
I'm into it. I'm into the whole thing. And then I think again, then the final scene of this, where they're all in trees.
Yeah.
And it's a problem from the books, but it is not done. And actually, this is where I started to really, I remember quite vividly being in the cinema, waiting for a payoff, I was on the side of this film. I wanted this film to show me something that I could hold on to, that would excite me and would help me to go along with it. And there's like a woolliness and a flappiness to the sort of the heroic narrative here, and it feels like it's trying to do big moments and to align character journeys. The whole stuff with Bilbo having a little fucking moment here and like attacking, it just doesn't work for me at all. And what happens in the book is they climb up some trees and then the eagles take them away.
Yeah, I mean, that literally happens here, but in a much more silly way. Again, I cannot accept the physics of the trees all dominoing into each other, and then just one on the end, and it's falling, it's like tipping off, and it's like clinging on by 2 or 3 roots, and all the dwarves are falling off, and they're grabbing onto each other's ankles, and then Gandalf's like, oh no, grab onto my staff. So there's Gandalf hanging off a tree, which is clinging onto the side of a mountain by 1 root, and there's like 2 dwarves hanging off his staff.
Yeah.
And they're all fine.
Yeah, they are. Eventually.
I just can't believe it. I just don't. I don't buy any of the peril. It's stupid.
I want the film to. Maybe they should have just killed a couple of dwarfs just early on, or he just gets fucking nailed by an orc, and everyone's like, "Oh shit, anything could happen in these films." I'd have loved that.
But yeah, then you get Thorin's little climax. There has to be some kind of climax, I guess, between the head dwarf and the head orc.
Yeah.
We've got this long-standing feud, and there's a little bit of one.
I feel like I think this is the point at which it's revealed now, the machinations of the storytelling, why they've kept Azog alive, the kind of story they feel like they need to be telling through this, the plight for the gold isn't enough.
No.
This, again, with a different register, a different sense of humour, a different approach, that could be enough. You just need to realign the tone so that it's not exactly the same as Lord of the Rings, because you're just onto a hiding. And that's what we have, I believe, is a hiding. And then at the end, I feel like Thorin's speech to Bilbo, who is so unrealistic. It's like when we were talking about Bob Shaye like watching, I don't get it. It's like, it has to start with a negative. Yeah. I said you were all these terrible things, and I've never been more wrong.
So he just loves Bilbo all of a sudden.
Well, Bilbo's trying to save him.
You've proved yourself to me now, Bilbo. I love you so much. I'm going to give you a hug.
I feel like the movie wants to deal in big dramatic moments, and the book was basically a bit silly.
Yes.
And about a burglar. Burglar. A burglar isn't like a cool Hollywood.
If I say he's a burglar, then a burglar he is.
There's a scene in the back end scene in the book where Bilbo, and it does that. Tolkien uses this device all the time where he says, in later times, Bilbo regretted the fuck out of what he was about to do. But he goes into the room and he's just, I think that maybe they didn't really pick up on this as a character note enough in the film. He was being talked down and he knew that he didn't really want to go on this quest. And there is that internal thing of like the tookishness of him versus the Baggins of him. But basically he says, I can hear that you're chatting shit about me and I don't know what it is you want me to do, but I could do it. And it's a bit Martin Freeman then. And I am a worthy person and I'm going to go on this quest. And it's like, and then they're like, all right, well, we're going to do this dragon. And they was like, okay, cool. But I kind of like that, that shows something about Bilbo.
Wow.
Oh, well.
We made it to the end of page 105.
It's my 105th birthday.
In The Hobbit. I think we've touched on all of the talking points I wanted to talk about.
My bullet points, Rob, just to run through them, because just to check we've covered them. I think I have. There is so much that's unnecessary. The shit with the plates, sexy dwarves, Thorin being a total prick, CG orcs, Martin Freeman's ticks, Radagast having shit all over him, the shit dwarf, and all the rousing nonsense and speeches. That's what I'd written down.
Yes. Yes. I wanted to talk, Ian McKellen, just quickly. Is Gandalf's magic still alive? I think it is a little bit. Yes. He's got so many of Tolkien's best lines in the Lord of the Rings films. Like almost everything Gandalf says in the Lord of the Rings
Imagine
is
if Lord
a
of the
Tolkien
Rings didn't
line.
exist, would we be enjoying Gandalf in this film?
Probably not. I mean, it's just Ian McKellen in the costume, isn't it? He's Gandalf the Grey. He's the best Gandalf.
His hat's really good in this, actually. It's a bit plumper. I quite like his hat. That's as best as I can do.
The silhouette of him running through the mines is great.
Exactly, yeah.
That's peak Gandalf.
And I feel like the original trilogy gave us so many moments of that imagination or an illustration I've seen at some point come to life. And there's only a handful. The fire with the Misty Mountain song, bursting through the door, under the mountain.
Yeah.
Not much else.
So the 3 questions then. Is there a standout performance in this film?
Yeah, actually, there is. It's oh man, I can't remember his name. Let me find him because I want to. Well, what's yours, and then I can do this.
I don't know. I'm struggling with this. Like, boringly, I think I'd have to go Andy Serkis just because I really like that scene. It's just, I mean, that was probably an easy day's work for Andy Serkis. Just going to turn up, do Gollum for a bit, and then off he goes again. But I just love it so much. Like I can't pick out anyone else really. I can't say Ian McKellen was amazing in that.
No,
like he was just.
I thought that there were a couple of dwarf performances that helped show the way I would like the whole thing to have been dealt with, and some of them are pretty generic. Graham McTavish is fine. I think that James Nesbitt as Bofur is really, really good, and he has that scene.
Oh, that scene, yeah.
It's just like he's realising, oh, you're right, you got to go home.
That was actually quite a good bit.
Yeah. It
was quite a good bit.
It is possible to have those moments.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say no. No, you're right. We don't belong anywhere.
And Ken Stott, I think.
I wish you all the luck in the world.
He's really and actors of that quality. And Ken Stott as Balin actually is probably my MVP. Ken Stott.
Yeah, Balin's great. Kindly Balin.
And you know what a tragic fate. I would watch a Balin movie of going into Moria. I'd much rather see that
would be good
than a fucking Gollum movie.
The downfall of Moria.
Exactly.
And the awakening of the Balrog.
And they'd have to call it Balrog Rising. Something terrible.
We joke about this. I bet in 10 years we'll be here talking about this film that they make.
I watched The War of Rohirrim yesterday.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Let's not talk about that now.
Can I just tell you one thing?
All right.
I really liked Helm Hammerhand. He's got that. It is like a Nord. There's better decisions in War of Rohirrim than there are in The Hobbit in terms of storytelling. Helm is just huge. Right at the beginning of the story, one of his Thrains, like one of his random lords in Rohan, offers him out basically, and Helm's like, all right, we'll fucking go. And they go outside, and this guy's chatting shit about Helm's daughter. This is setting up the whole film right at the beginning, and punches Helm a bunch of times, and then Helm just hits him once and kills him. And it sets up the rest of the film. I was like, fuck yeah.
Amazing. Wow, I look forward to seeing that. Standout scene? Is it anything other than Riddles in the Dark?
It is not.
No.
Riddles in the let's be positive. Riddles in the Dark was really good.
It was good. And the James Nesbitt scene we just talked about was also quite good, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
The best line. Is there a line? For me, it's the TikTok Gandalf line.
Yeah, that's good. And for me, it's the line. I just really like Gollum saying, "We hates it forever." We hates it forever.
Yeah. Sad, isn't it? Slim pickings.
It is, considering how long it is.
Considering how long it is and considering what's come before. So before we sign off then, we're going to go back to our old tradition of including some mailbag in the actual episode because we've managed to get through this in fairly decent time.
Yes. Mailbag, Rob. I've got mail. I've just got to...
There it is. There's the bag.
Brilliant. Mailbag. Yeah, we had quite a lot. Do you know, Lord of the Rings, we should say, I feel like we haven't done much housekeeping. We just mentioned that Dave has had a kid. Just offhandedly. That's why Dave's not here. Dave's had a kid. Also, Lord of the Rings has been our most listened to ever episodes of the podcast. So Thank you everyone who joined us for Lord of the Rings. Sorry that we've been a bit down on this one. But the increased listenership, but also engagement. Lots of people sent us lots of messages about Lord of the Rings.
They did.
It's those which we'll be dipping into right now. Just want to make sure that I've got the right one. So the first one here has been from Tim Cobb, who says, "Dear Nath, Dave and Rob, I've been a proud lurker for over 10 years now, but I'm enjoying this new podcast so much I felt I had to write in. This series has made me reflect on some of the games and films that shaped me, and a lot of your favourites really resonate. I thought you guys would like to know that you are yourselves a huge part of these formative experiences for me, and I'm certain for many others. That's very kind, Tim. Thank you. As Rob mentioned recently on your other pod, life's more complicated than the carefree days of summer when we got to enjoy Final Fantasy VII on the sofa in our pants. But you three never failed to entertain and provide a welcome escape. Thanks for everything you do. Do you know, this just made me think about the difference between Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, just because carefree summer days for me with Lord of the Rings, and The Hobbit is much more now, even though we are as far away now from The Hobbit as The Hobbit was from Lord of the Rings. With the above in mind, I'm interested to hear whether you've ever reflected on how you developed your own fandom and whether this affects your perception of things you're fans of personally. Would you change anything you've made in the past based on how fans have reacted? Do you care what your fans think? Or is it more of a vocation? Does Stephen Moffat really care what Dave thinks of the Vashta Narada? No, he does not.
No.
Keep going, chaps. I thought that was interesting, and I guess we do have. I wouldn't call them fans. Maybe they are fans, but like we have a following and an audience. Does it ever make you think about the stuff that you've made, or do you think about those people when you are writing stuff, Rob?
Yeah, I guess so. Well, I most of the time just write what I think would be funny or good, and if I think I would like this, but I know that a lot of people have resonated with a lot of the stuff we've made, and so I guess at the same time it's like it's almost one and the same thing. If I think I will like something, then a bunch of people who watch our stuff will also like it. I
feel like you're the most recognizable because of the Friday features. So maybe it's slightly different to you, but I would say that we're just on that level where we have I've enjoyed having people who enjoy our work, but it's not like crowds of people outside the office. Do you know what I mean? It's not like Peter Jackson going into making The Hobbit. Although interesting, something like the series that we used to make at Christmas, or that we still make at Christmas, that's probably on the level where there's a following behind that, which does add a bit of pressure.
I mean, on the rare occasion that someone will come and speak to me in the street, invariably it's the Christmas maze that is mentioned.
Interesting.
It's like, I'm really looking forward to the Christmas maze. Like earlier this year, back in 2024, like I think someone in around September, October time,
when you knew
stopped me in the street, and I was like, I just can't wait for the Christmas maze this year.
All I've been clinging on
and
for.
Just in my head I was just like, you're going to be so disappointed in December. But hopefully they've enjoyed watching the Hitman series instead.
Just your eyes going blank. Oh,
thank you. Bye.
Moving swiftly on. Here's an email from Kelly. This is one that we already spoke about together, Rob. Hi guys, loving Lord of the Rings coverage. Listening to it brought back so many memories. I am from Wellington, New Zealand, and I grew up on the street that Peter Jackson lived on. The Frighteners was filmed a few blocks away. It was all very normal to have streets closed or access restricted for filming, or notes put through the letterbox to let us know that any gunshots are from filming and to not call the police. It was my final year of school when filming started on Lord of the Rings. We all knew it was a massive deal, especially when we were filming the scene from The Fellowship, hiding from the Dark Rider behind our school. We had to cancel cricket practice for weeks because they needed our top field and we couldn't access the nets.
Wow.
When the call came out for horses and riders for the film, some casting people came to the stables where my horse was. I'm so glad you noted that most of the riders in the films were women with glued-on facial hair. I was almost one of these women. Unfortunately, my failed racehorse took the opportunity to try and prove that he was not, in fact, a failed racehorse. We were riding a charge and my horse, Simon, why is that funny? was intent on beating the rest of the field. He was not keen on keeping his place in line and insisted on racing ahead of everyone. Apparently, there was no place for a random rider and Simon going ahead to meet the enemy before anybody else. Much to our shame, we were sent home early. One of the other horses I schooled was kept on as one of the Black Rider's horses. I mean, that's even cooler.
Cool.
When I watch Fellowship, I always give him a wave. So the only time I appear in the film is when we recorded it as the chanting of orcs at a cricket game I was at. Peter Jackson came on at the inning break to lead us all in chanting Dark Speech that I think was in Two Towers. And I'm pretty sure we beat England that day too. You did.
That's cool, isn't it?
Yeah, really good. And actually, I've got to find now a longer one. Cloudy Wolf. Hi, guys. Stumbled upon the podcast during our traditional Christmas trilogy rewatch. I thoroughly enjoyed the them. One of my favourite notes on the films is related to the Uruk-hai army. What's the best way to record a 10,000 strong army chanting? Well, if you're Peter Jackson, then the answer is by heading along to the Westpac Stadium in Wellington and recording a cricket crowd during the innings break, of course. I can still remember him leading the chant as we all read the words from the big screen, made even sweeter by the fact that the quarry where they filmed Helm's Deep was just 5 minutes up the road from my house. My own tiny contribution to my favourite films. All the best, Matt. So Matt was at the same cricket game.
That's cool.
It's like everyone in Wellington just went to this cricket game.
I did know that. It's in the appendices, that bit where he goes to the cricket. It's one of the things that I was going to talk about, but then didn't in the main episodes. That's so cool that we've got a nearly rider of Rohan listening to the podcast.
And 2 Urks. I can't believe they were at the same game. That's kind of crazy. Maybe they were like, we should go to the game because they're going to be recording bits we can be in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, well, I guess, like, you know, it's a big event. Like the whole town would be at the cricket game. Just one of those things.
More excellent mailbag coming up from Mark Allen. How's it, RSCC? A while back, the pod asked for suggestions moving forward. I wanted to ask if it would be possible to make a Red Shirt Cinema Club recommendation list. I often listen while running or commuting, so forget to write down the movies, books, games, etc. that I mentioned, and I would love a list that I could go to when I'm looking for something to watch, read, or play. We got close to doing that on Patreon after we did a recommendation episode over Christmas. So maybe I'll just make that into more of a formal thing. Really enjoying the holiday Lord of the Rings and... What's TH? Tottenham Hotspur. The Hobbit coverage. I'm a professor of medieval literature, so I've enjoyed answering your questions to myself as I run. Did Tolkien make up elves and dwarves? No. His scholarship was mainly concerned with Germanic sagas, so we got most of his info from there, including all the dwarves' names in The Hobbit from a literal list of dwarf names in the Prose Edda. Why are elves good at archery? Because elves, and specifically elf shot, were a convenient medieval excuse for heart attacks and brain aneurysms. You have to be a pretty good archer to kill a person or a horse with an invisible arrow without ever being seen. Even Boromir's death is pulled exactly from the Song of Roland. My own research deals a lot with continuing medieval aesthetics, stories and characters in modern and new media. So sorry for the long email, I just get excited. As a fandom-related question, are there any franchises you think work better when experienced in the in-universe chronological order, or do you always go for publication/release order? That's a good question. I think as a podcast, while you're thinking about this, we've obviously decided to go for production order.
I always prefer production order.
And I like, because I think a lot of the things that I enjoy about watching films are understanding how they're made and the circumstances and the sort of industrial setups behind they're made and how that might influence the film. So to me, like, the groundedness of understanding a film comes from watching them in production order.
Also, I think people get too het up about chronological order. I don't think it's as important as people often like to make out. Like, stories are not told chronologically most of the time. Like the Star Wars saga is a great example. You watch it in release order. That's how the story is told. In the prequels, it relies on knowledge of the first 3 films for all of the dramatic beats to work and have any kind of impact. Metal Gear Solid is another one that people often talk about. Like, oh, I'll play it in chronological order. I'll play Metal Gear Solid 3 first. No. Fools.
I agree.
It goes 1, 2, 3, 4. You need the knowledge from 1 and 2 for the dramatic beats of and the narrative of number 3 to make sense and to fully come across. Like, you don't have to. Nothing has to be. You don't have to have chronological order all the time.
I think it's like a heightened version of something which we've spoken about a little bit before, about sort of the urge for ultimate consistency in fictional universes. Understand that these are things which are made by people, and that perfect continuity doesn't exist, and that they might do their best to try and make it exist, but we are being ridiculous if we think that it can exist. So, for example, my kids yesterday were talking about Mads is just rewatching Breaking Bad, which is fucking brilliant, and then they were talking about, I think she's just watched Better Call Saul over the last kind of 6 months or whatever, and so my kids are talking about, I think it's doing the rounds on like reels at the moment, the perfect way to watch Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul and El Camino, the movie, and it's Better Call Saul up until season 5 or whatever, then all of Breaking Bad, then El Camino, and then Better Call Saul, and it's basically just chopping it up chronologically. So we had a really short discussion just about, sure, that's like how the story plays out, and you'll see people getting older and whatever, younger, and it might be a bit weird. But I understand that the real magic of Better Call Saul is knowing that they're writing this new show in a really small fictional space where they've already explored and done loads of stuff in Breaking Bad. And it's that you only understand how clever they're being if you've seen Breaking Bad and you understand the restrictions that they're working within.
Yeah.
And then the drama is thrilling on a different level. If you just watch it in order, it's just a fucking white bread sandwich. It just, you know what I mean?
Yes.
There's nothing to it. Just to answer your question, Mark. Alan, I believe I've jumped ahead. I've got one more, and it's actually not about Lord of the Rings, because there was a time when we weren't a Lord of the Rings podcast.
Yes, there was.
I no longer remember the taste of Doctor Who. Dear Redshirt Cinema Club crew, thank you for doing this podcast. I am a 50-year-old gamer and cinephile, so I've been a long-time fan of all of you on Access and now on this podcast. This is from Jorge Raul Gonzalez. I've been binging the podcast, and I'm now up to the second Doctor Who episode, Midnight, and I have to say, I've never seen Doctor Who, and I have a question. It seems to me that Doctor Who has similarities to The Twilight Zone. Am I correct in assuming this? And if so, what are your thoughts and maybe some episodes that are most like The Twilight Zone? Keep up the good work, and God bless, Jorge. And then just in brackets at the end, I'm Mexican, with a massive smiley face, which I really like. And I wish your fellow Mexican had actually ended up directing The Hobbit.
Yeah, I wish I could actually answer this question, but I've never seen The Twilight Zone.
Well, it's okay, Rob, because I was thinking about this on the way in. And The Twilight Zone is Rod Serling, similar time to Star Trek, anthology sci-fi series. So every week it would be a different scenario. So I think probably what Jorge is picking up on is that we picked out lots of our favourite episodes, and our favourite episodes, our personal taste, probably leans more into those one-off satisfying science fiction stories and scenarios than maybe another Doctor Who's fandom would. And actually, if you carry on listening to our Doctor Who series, maybe you'll find some other influences coming in. And actually, Rob really enjoying the Matt Smith arc in particular, that will probably come through as well. And that's the other strength of Doctor Who, is that it does have this central formula of the time-travelling eccentric and his crew. But I would say in terms of like that list of episodes which are most like The Twilight Zone, I think because that's how I enjoy the show, the ones that I talk about and that we made a little list of, and that we basically the Moffat episodes, those are probably the ones which you'll get most out of, where you're trying to figure out the scenario as you're watching the program, and it's less kind of serialized. So what was the first? We watched Dalek, right?
Yeah, we watched Rose and Dalek, the Christopher Eccleston episodes.
And then we watched Midnight.
Then we watched Midnight from David Tennant's era.
And it might be a bonus episode if you want to watch
Blink as a bonus episode.
But Blink is definitely very Twilight Zone-y. And I think the Empty Child also has a definite Twilight Zone kind of vibe to it. And in the new Russell T Davies, I can't remember the name of the episode, but there's an episode of the 3 that he made with David Tennant before Ncuti Gatwa came in to be the Doctor. There's one set on a spaceship, which again
Wild Blue Yonder, you're talking about?
Yeah, it's exactly right. Have you seen it yet?
Not yet. I just remember you talking about it and I remember the name. I watched one recently because my daughter's still watching it. She's got 3 episodes left of the Matt Smith era.
Oh, man.
She's right at the end of season 7. And it's one I had no memory of at all, but I actually really enjoyed, where it's like a ghost episode. Then Dougray Scott plays like this professor who's researching this ghost in this haunted house. It's quite scary. And it's just a ghost that's appearing in all these photographs they take. And the Doctor has the great idea of like traveling through time, through billions of years, and going to this house, or where this house is, and taking a photo. And he comes back to the house and develops all the photos, and he sees that it's actually a time traveller stuck in a pocket universe. And they put all the photos together, and it's like an animation of this woman running away from something. It's just cool.
That is very cool.
It's a really cool sci-fi story mixed with, and that's what I love so much about Doctor Who, is it starts off as just like, it looks for all intents and purposes like just a scary ghost episode. And then it just gets flipped into this really cool sci-fi idea. Great stuff. Watch that one as well. It's good.
I hope you enjoy. That's it from Mailbag.
Oh, it's nice to do Mailbag at the end of an episode.
It is. Had to get that.
Like
We're
the
going to have
good
to
old
find a
days.
way to not just be big babies about the
I don't
Hobbit.
think we've been big babies.
I feel like I've been a big baby.
I don't think we've tried to give it a fair
shake.
There's lots of interesting stuff about why the movies are like they are as well. I wish I knew, or wish we had time to dive into like the full history of the whole Guillermo del Toro thing. I'm still sad about it now.
I'd love to have seen what that would have been.
Imagining what it would have been. Well, we have got 2 more Hobbit episodes to come.
Please help us by writing in, and especially if you like the Hobbit films.
Yeah.
Please, no shade from us, but I'd love to give me reasons to reevaluate. Please.
So if my dad's listening to this, let me know why you think the Hobbit is better than Lord of the Rings. And we will be back next Monday with The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug. Is that what it's called?
It is, yeah. And before that,
a bonus episode in the interim.
And the bonus episode will be this week. We'll be watching Peter Jackson's Brain Dead.
I'm looking forward to this because I've not seen that yet. Not seen it before. I think I've seen the other one, Bad Taste. I think that's the one I've seen.
The alien film.
Yeah. So look forward to that. Please do continue to send us in your emails. Our email address is redshirtcinemaclub@gmail.com. We also have a Patreon if you'd like to become a member and listen to those 2 bonus episodes every month. Please do. We'd love to have your support. Otherwise, we will see you next Monday for more Hobbit. See you then. You've been listening to Red Shirt Cinema Club. If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Just check the link in the description. We'd also love to hear from you. Email us at redshirtcinemaclub@gmail.com or follow us on social media. We'll be back with another episode next Monday. See you then.